Hello, hello. Hello everyone, and ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are in a good mood. My name is Ariane. I work for Enko Education, and I am very happy to be your host today. I am actually honored to be your host today. I will dive in the subject right away. So I remember growing up seeing a lot of male teachers than female. And sometimes I would call a female teacher Mister when she asked me a question because I was used to see more male teachers. And today, in a small scale, working myself in education, I can still see the difference between women in school administration and women in the teaching staff. So today is International Teachers Day. I want to take the time to say happy International Teachers Day to all the teachers in the world. And especially if they see me, especially to the ones that were part of my life and part of my education, and the ones who taught me who I am today. Since 1994, UNESCO has set this day to be the day to celebrate the significant role played by teachers and mentors in students' lives. However, there's still a gap. Like I mentioned earlier, the studies show that there is an underrepresentation of women in leadership roles in education and other fields as well. So when I say gender equality, does that ring a bell to you? Well, it does to me because it reminds me of two of the 17th Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations in 2015, which are number four, which is concerning quality education, and goal number five concerning gender equality. So today, we decided to celebrate all teachers this year by impersonating goal five. We are calling all women educators. Without further ado, I have three wonderful ladies today to discuss the subject with you. I have Mrs. Proserpina Dlamini Fisher, which is the founder and CEO of Education Aspiration, IB World's School Senior Manager. I also have Mrs. Utso Agari Kumi, Dean of African Leadership Academy, and last but not least, I have Mrs. Radha Pillai, Director of Teaching and Learning at Enko Education. So I will let those ladies introduce themselves. And now I will start with Mrs. Utso. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Thank you very much, Ariane, and hello, everyone, and happy Teachers' Day. And thank you, Enko, for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this discussion today. So as Ariana said, my name is Proserpina Dlamini Fisher. I'm a Swati from Eswatini, which was formerly known as Swaziland. And I hope that very soon we'll stop being like the artist who was formerly known as Prince. Yeah. I'm the founder, as she said, of Educational Aspirations, which is an educational consultancy which works with schools, school leaders, young educators, focusing on the principles of Ubuntu, the implementation of IB programs, diversity and inclusion, and just mentoring and coaching. I'm also the IB World Schools Manager in a team of about 10 in the International Baccalaureate. And I personally have a portfolio of about 240 schools globally that I support in the implementation of the IB program. So I've been a student and an educator in state, government, private, independent, and what we call international schools as well. And I've taught from first grade up to 12th grade, but I've also taught adults as well in my educational experience. And I've had several roles, so very diverse experiences. I've lived in 4 different continents and worked in 7 different countries. And I have been mainly focused in the secondary school where I've been principal. This was in Germany, in Dubai, and in the US as well. I've also worked in the United World Colleges as Director of Education. So in a quick nutshell, as much as I've tried to run away from education, it keeps calling me back, be it in schools or in international institutions. We were asked to mention a role model, and I've struggled because I've stood on the shoulders of amazing giants on my journey, and I'm grateful to all of them, and I salute them all because each one had a different lesson to teach me. So I'm sorry, Ariane, I have no one specific person because I've been surrounded by phenomenal women and mothers and sisters throughout my whole life. Thank you.
Thank you. It's okay. Now I'll go to Mrs. Utso. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Yes, thank you, Ariane. Thank you so much, Pro, for your wonderful introduction. Hello and good evening to everyone on the webinar. It is also a pleasure to be here. I hope you can all hear me properly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So a brief introduction about myself. My name is Uzo Ajarekumi. For those of Africans who see that name, they will know the surname. The first name is Nigerian, so I'm Nigerian by birth. The second name, which is my surname, is Ghanaian, so I'm Ghanaian by marriage. So I like to call myself a Nigerian Ghanaian. As you see, I am currently at African Leadership Academy. I have been here since 2014. I have been in different roles. So I did take up the Dean of the Academy role in 2014 for about 2 years, moved on to being Dean for Global Programs, which is a sort of sideways shift. And just like Pro, just as I thought I was about to leave, they pulled me back in to take this role on this year and to run the academy for this year. For those of you who don't know African Leadership Academy, it's based in Johannesburg. We are a pre-university school and we serve young people from the ages of 16 to 19 years of age. Our mission is to develop the next generation of African leaders, ethical leaders. And it is such an awesome pleasure to be with you today. My background primarily is education. So I have taught at a time. Much of my experience has been administration, so middle teachers and then head teacherships. I also have a bit of a diverse background. So I've worked in different NGO organizations, World Bank, in different countries and different continents as well. It has been a blessing, an absolute blessing to have been exposed to such. I have a role model, Pro, and just like you, there's so many we you know that have affected and impacted my life. But my role model is my mom. She's the first person my eyes opened to. She is, and she was a teacher before she passed, and my first nurturer. And I think everything that I am today really stems from the lessons she learned as a teacher and her dedication to that skill and craft. And so I stand here in honor and recognition and appreciation for her and for all mothers and sisters who are women educators. Thank you, Ariane.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Otso. And now I'll give the floor to Mrs. Rada to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Ariane. Okay, I'm very proud to be in such illustrious company. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Radha Pillay, South African, and currently Head of Learning and Teaching at Enko Education. The mission of Enko initially started off wanting to offer affordable IB education to students in Africa, and to get them into universities of their choice, to be a launch pad. We very soon realized that we needed, some of our schools needed Cambridge, and some of our schools have national education, and we've broadened that base to include getting these kids into universities of their choice on the continent and, of course, all over the world. I've been head of school. The head of learning and teaching is a recent transition, but I've been a teacher for the very longest time. So I want to wish all the teachers out there very, very happy Teachers' Day. It's one day where all the kids kind of celebrate teachers, and as well as everyone else. And I think I always appreciated that day. I spent a long time teaching in South Africa, but I've had some international stints in Canada and Eswatini. And like Prospina and Utso, I've been inspired by so many formidable women along the way, including writers, activists, revolutionaries, women working in education, singers, actors, that I don't think I can actually single out any one of them. But what I have learned from them is to speak truth to power, to be courageous and fearless, and sometimes to actually fake it until it becomes a reality.
Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Radha. And before we continue, I would like to remind everyone that in about 30 minutes, we will have a Q&A session. So please ask your questions in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. So now, I have the first question for you ladies, and it will be, in your experience in education in Africa, what have you noticed with regards to the place of women? I will ask the first question to Mrs. Proserpina.
Thank you, Ariane. You know, you mentioned the type of educators you had when you were growing up. And I think historically, globally, we all know that women weren't allowed to learn in schools, formal, access to formal education for many centuries. And when we finally were, what we saw was a whole load of male educators. And after that, women did come in the space, but we saw only male educators still in leadership roles. And sadly, years later, we're still way behind, and this is global. We're still way behind, and we're still seeing many more men, excuse me, gentlemen, if you're out there, but in the boys' club in education. And I know growing up, my mother, both my parents were educators, but I know with my mom's generation, most of my aunties and her friends were either teachers or nurses or secretaries. So I asked myself, was this the default? I don't know what the situation or the opportunities, how they were presented to them, but even at that level, it was mainly in elementary school and not in secondary school. And again, many generations later, we're still seeing that. And I know we see it on our continent as well. We do have educational leaders that are women. We have ministers of education in our continent. Even in Eswatini now, I think we have our second, if not third, minister of education who's a woman, which is great. We see them in tertiary institutions, but it's somewhere in the middle, and also within schools where we're not seeing enough. And I say it's important because when you see women, they aspire young women to be interested in the profession, but also see people like themselves. And in our international educational space, we're just not seeing enough educators, and we're not seeing enough school leaders that look like me and will hold my passport. And I know that there are many reasons why they're not accessing the profession as such, but this is the time where we are here to encourage them and to show them that we can, and we all can. We're sitting here as three powerful educators, and it's exciting to see, but we need to make others realize that more and more of us can join education, can teach, can lead, can be role models, can be aspirational, and make a difference. I was saddened just speaking to some friends to hear that there is still quite a lot of bullying in educational institutions, and there's still a lot of disrespect for women leaders and women educators as well. And again, I think it's not even special to our continent, it's global. But at a personal level, I learned that I had to be excellent to survive against my peers that are male and to others that didn't look like me. And I always say that's okay, because we are excellent, right? This is who we are, and it's important to hold on to that. Just like Radha said, fake it until you make it, and we've had to do that. But looking at international schools, private schools in Africa, I think there's a fear, there's not enough confidence for women to apply to the international private type of school. And this is an onus on us to push them, encourage them, and know that it's possible. It might be a long journey, but until you take that pen and apply, you'll never know if you can come in or not. So in the big picture of things, we've come a long way, very exciting, but the reality is we still have many more ways to go to actually empower, encourage, and make women realize that there's so much influence and impact we can have within international and private schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Prosopina. I will now give the floor to Mrs. Radha to give her opinion about the first question.
Okay, I can speak most fluently and authentically about the challenges women educators face in South Africa, and some of what I have to say can be generalized to Southern Africa and other countries in Africa. After apartheid, women in general and Black women in particular had a lot of catching up to do, especially from the triple marginalization of race, sexism, social class. It helped that we had a very enlightened constitution that allowed women to put their hands up for roles not open to women before. However, some 20 years later, our story has not played out idyllically. Government has created policies that offer equal opportunity to all, but it has paid much less attention to the way policy converts to action. And there's no way of bringing companies or employers to book if women are discriminated against, especially in terms of wage discrimination, employment choices, and how we treat women of childbearing age. Progressive legal frameworks here and even in Kenya still do not translate into women being fully represented in leadership in secondary or higher education, despite the changes in law and policy over the years. In South Africa, over 22%, only 22% of principals are women in secondary schools, much lower than the world average of 47%. And out of our 26 public universities, there are only 4 female vice chancellors. This failure of the education sector to harness and develop women's talent curtails their ability to contribute meaningfully to society in this very, very important vocation. In his paper, Pastoral Care of Female Teachers, A South African View, Balea, the author, talks of mass resignations of teachers, mostly women, triggered by heavy workload, intimidation, ongoing incidents in school violence that pose a threat to female teachers in their environment. And this is going to have a massive impact on how education will be shaped in the coming years. And studies have shown also that teachers actually blame themselves when they cannot cope and either suffer in silence or resign to voice their unhappiness. So we need to do something about the situation, and we need to do it quite soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Radha. And now I have Mrs. Utso give her also her opinion, because I would like to remind you guys that these are their opinions backed up by studies, but it's their opinion. So I will have Mrs. Utso give her opinion about the first question.
Thank you, and thank you, Radha and Pro, for your opinions. Mine is not any different, aside from just adding to the cultural challenges we have with just enabling young girls to actually come to be educated, talk much less of having them become teachers. We still have a challenge in many of our countries where a child will not be seen as able to go to school. You know, if there is a cost towards the education, you're absolutely certain a girl child will not have that access to school. You also have the stigma. I know there are certain places in West Africa where if you say you're a teacher, people will make the assumption that you're a teacher because you couldn't be a lawyer or you couldn't be what you wanted to be. And so the default is to become a teacher. So therefore, the profession in itself is then seen as very low grade, which is funny because it is teachers that teach lawyers. It is teachers that teach accountants. And so there's a misrepresentation and a perception that I think needs to change. And it, you know, I think the government, I'm not sure what the government is doing and our governments are doing in terms of actually rectifying some of that because of the policies that they actually write, because of the way in which they view and continually address the issues of education. I want to believe that a Ministry of Education will have at its focus, you know, women at its core. But I'm still struggling to see, and I hear you, Radha, in terms of just what South Africa is trying to do. I'm not sure that is happening in other countries where women are put at the forefront, you know, that there is a very clear policy around positively discriminating for women to be able to be seen in the rightful place that they deserve to be. I'll stop there and pause there for now, Ariane.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Otso. And I see that all of you already talked about the challenges that you have seen. Mrs. Prasapina all talked about the fear that can be there for a teacher, for women to apply. And Mrs. Radha talked about the policies that are being put in place that are different than action. And Mrs. Utso, you talked about something that I feel like I've seen myself, which is, you know, it's thinking that being a teacher or being in a teaching profession is a default from what you could have been, and just because you're not that, then you're becoming a teacher. And all of you talked about the challenges, but do you want maybe come back on one of the challenges that one of the speakers already talked about? And I'm really interested about how do you see, have you seen it yourself, the fact that sometimes it's considered as a default profession just because you were not able to be something else?
I've seen that personally in conversations, even with my peers, you know, people who've had to become teachers. And the impact of that is that they become sometimes very, very bad teachers because they're not there with the, you know, as seeing teaching as a vocation. And so, yes, you know, there are people who wanted to be lawyers. They didn't get the point. And the only place they could go was, you know, to this university. There's also the possibility that the university they wanted to go to do teaching, there are different levels. So if you didn't go to university and you went to a polytechnic or you went to a little college of education, there were degrees in terms of how reduced you would be perceived as a teacher. Just really awful, horrible things. So you come into a place where you're supposed to nurture and teach young people with a resentment, already. And so imagine that for a woman educator who's coming in, who wants to be a teacher and who loves what she does. And, she's surrounded by people who don't see this role as important or significant.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Pros.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I remember my first experience in teaching. It was a Catholic government school in my country, and I was welcomed at the school and taken to the classroom. And the classroom had chairs and desks and a blackboard and chalk, and that was it. And overnight, I had to create a curriculum and make sure that those students were going to be successful. I cried many a times, and my dear mother was there to support me. But what I saw in the staff room, what I saw as I spoke to other teachers, was that quite a lot of what Uzo is saying resonates with this, because it was a means to an end. It was a way to work, to pay bills. So there wasn't the passion. It was tough for me as a new educator because I needed that va-va-vroom to keep me in the profession. And all I saw were people who came to work, did what they had to do, and leave. And that was sad. And I don't know how much it's changed since then, because there's so much. This is one of the most exciting professions that we have. But unless the passion and the excitement and the support and the professional development and the collaboration with peers, there's so much that happens in an educational space when the leadership gets it. But if the leadership doesn't, then people die within their job. So it shouldn't be a means to an end, but it should be the reason you jump up every morning, because you want to go to work, you want to make a difference, you want to have an impact. And we just still have a long way to go, I think, in our schools. We tend to see more in international education, and hand on heart, it's been a long time since I've been in state educational systems. But if we want more young people to join the profession and join schools, it has to be the cool place to be. And we have to make noise about that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Mrs. Rada, you had something to say about that?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that the very famous Ken Robinson once said, if you tell people at a dinner party you're a teacher, they get this glazed look in their eyes and they can't wait to move on, because what do you talk to a teacher about? And that's kind of been the shadow that teachers have worked under. It's an undervalued profession. The fact that in South Africa we still have unions means that we're not very professional. We need someone to actually kind of walk us through the paces. And unless we do something quite drastic, we're not going to get young people to join the profession. And I want to urge all those young teachers out there who are on this webinar and beyond to actually stand up and make a difference, because sometimes you have to work with with this from the inside, and make it cool for the generation that's coming to actually, because there's never going to be anything that, even though there's AI and all kinds of online learning, you're not going to be able to take the place of a teacher in a classroom, and that feminine aspect has to be in a school too. You just cannot have a whole staff room of males, because even they will miss something if they don't hear the voices of everyone around them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I love that. Being a teacher has to be the cool place, and you have to be the cool kid, okay? Being a teacher, be the cool kid. So I have a last question for you, and I will start with Mrs. Rada. What can organizations and companies do to empower women educators in Africa? Do you know of an initiative that empower women educators?
Yeah, in South Africa, we have the Gender Commission, with the special view on women educators as well. But the fact that we actually have to go to the Gender Commission to be noticed and to, to actually say we've been, maligned for a particular position also speaks volumes about where we are in terms of gender. But at the moment at Enko, we recently found that we just have about 40% female employees in teaching and non-teaching jobs. And traveling through West Africa, the leadership team noticed that in some of our schools, the proportion of female teachers is below 25%. And we already know that that impact is going to have some, and that's going to have some impact on our young girls. And we therefore decided we wanted to balance the population of women across the group. And our best route is through recruitment. So every year, Enko run mass recruitment campaigns to shortlist teachers on the continent. Although we have publicized job offers every year, we get only about 30% female applications. And this year, we decided to take up the challenge of doubling this ratio. And we are trying to get 60% female applications for our January 2023 recruitment year.
Okay, that's a goal. And so now I will ask the same question to Mrs. Utso.
Hi, thank you. Like at Enko Education at ALA, we probably have a 50-50 split, probably slightly leaning towards more women than men, which is always a good thing. And so I think one of the things that I'm deeply grateful and happy for is that because we have so many women, there is that balance. We can see our students recognizing that there's a place at the table for everyone, whether you're a male or you're a female. And the opportunities that they see with young female educators, some people as young as 23, 24, who've made this a decision to be a teacher and an educator, a female educator, reaching out to 16, 17-year-olds is mind-blowing for them. And so just the richness of the conversations itself has really spun on its head and really sort of deconstructing some of the myths and the stereotypes and the perceptions that many of our students come to ALA with about what a teacher should look like or what a teacher should feel like or say. ALA provides that space for some dynamic transformation, and I'm super grateful to be here as one of the female heads. Even within my team, I think we have several departments that are just women, and they are middle leadership women leaders, and it's refreshing. I think the question for me around this issue is really, how do we support them? How do we equip them? How do we enable and empower them to recognize who they are? I think Radha said, how do we speak power to truth? And so how do we help our young female educators rise in themselves with the knowledge that, they are who they can be any day, any time. And they know that they have people walking alongside them, cheering them on. So that would be, something that we are doing actively, recognizing and honoring and acknowledging our female educators.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Prasipina, what do you think?
Well, I think my dear sisters have touched on what I was also thinking. I think organizations, institutions, and schools need to be very intentional in their marketing and recruitment strategies so that it's very clear. They need to be training the leadership and governance on inclusion and diversity so that there's clarity in the direction that they're all going towards. There needs to be consciousness of making sure that the teaching body is representative of the student body, because students all need to be with people that look like them and understand them as well. And it's really tough when there are not enough I went through that many a time in my life where I was in schools where no one looked like me in the teaching staff, and I didn't get the support that I needed. I also think that Uzo mentioned this a bit about making sure the opportunities to grow and develop are in place. So it's one thing to recruit and hire female educators, but if you're not offering professional development, you're not offering mentoring to help them on the journey, you'll probably lose them along the way, as the statistics that Radha shared with us. We need to be also creating systems in place where, in international education, we see on the continent, many a time, people that look like me are hired to be teaching assistants or language teachers or in other areas, but not necessarily in the teaching. And so we need to be ensuring that we're pushing for that. We're making noise. We're not stopping. It has to be the cool place to be at. And I've worked with the University of the People to help with the scholarships for African teachers to get their master's program. And it's really broken my heart to see that in the 21st century, there's still so many CVs that aren't even professional. And it's hard to read and understand. So there are still some basic fundamental pieces that need to be in place so that we can start encouraging and we can start empowering. And it starts with baby steps, but those steps are so important and it takes a lot of patience. So very important to apply, ladies. You got this, but the ladies on the other side need to be ready to welcome, mentor, and even the gentlemen. I think this is so important for education, the future of education in Africa. The point that all those professionals we see out there are because there was a teacher behind them. We can't forget that. So this is I've got goosebumps. It's such an important profession. It's not recognized enough, but we're still there. We didn't run away. It's that easy to leave and do something else. So we're still there, and we're here to inspire more of you to join it so that we can make a difference. We can make a positive difference, have impact, and look at the future of our continent and make sure that we continue to grow and develop and empower so that we are the phenomenal Africans that we know we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm really honored to be, I would say I'm honored to be here just because this is also giving me goosebumps. And I thank you ladies for being here and to have all of those things to say, because this is really important for young ladies to hear. It's I wish I had that when I was growing up, because maybe I could have been a teacher today. But I'm happy to be in education and help. And really thank you for all your opinions and everything that you said. Now, we are getting to our Q&A session, and we received questions. And we have a couple questions that want to be asked live. So I will wait that the technical support gives them the floor to be able to answer, to ask their question on their own. So do I have the first person to ask their question? And I will also want to remind you guys that you still have the opportunity to ask your question. If you want to ask your question live, you can raise your hand and we'll give you the floor to ask your question. Well, so I'll go with I'll read out the question and so you ladies can answer. How will we help change the stereotype that traditionally favor boys over girls to advance in education? This issue is deep rooted in many African societies. I will ask Mrs. Utso if you have your first opinion to give us about that question.
Could you repeat the question, Ariane?
Yes, no problem. How will we help change the stereotype that traditionally favor boys over girls to advance in education. This issue is deep-rooted in many African societies.
I think we will change that when we recognize a child is a child. That you don't recognize the gender. You recognize that a child needs the basic rights. They need a right to education. They need right to shelter. They need right to health care and stuff. It doesn't say a girl needs it or does a boy. And so when we start recognizing a child for what they are, in my language, in Nigeria, Igbo, we say nwa, and nwa means child. We don't, I gave birth to a child. I don't say I gave birth to a girl or I gave birth to a boy. I gave birth to a child. And so when we begin to see the young people, before us as children, desiring and in need of things to make them citizens, of their societies, that's when we start to break down these stereotypes. These stereotypes have been handed to us in a way that, for whatever reasons, and for whatever the stories are, we must see every child as a child, requiring the best and the basics, and education is one of them.
Wow, thank you so much. I like that, seeing a child as a child, not a boy or a girl, to have the right to education. Thank you so much. And the next question is for Mrs. Rada. A female friend once told me that a woman is born with a full-time job, that is being a mother and wife. So she chose a teaching career because it's not involving. Do you think that it is realistic aspiration? And what would you tell a girl child using motherhood in choosing a career?
So the question says that being a teacher is not as involving in the workplace, so you can look after the children.
So so you choose that as a profession so that you have the time to be a wife and to be a mother. So what would you tell a girl child? I'm smiling because I know you have something for us. And what would you tell a girl child?
Drop the bomb.
Using motherhood in choosing a career?
Look, I think a personal anecdote, that's what I did. I had the golden handcuff. There was a very nice school that gave my kids a huge discount, and I stayed for more than I should have because they were there. And some schools do that. It's unfortunately or fortunately, the responsibility for the children lies heavily. No, I'm not saying the male doesn't. Of course, they have to do what they need to do, but it also lies heavily the day-to-day responsibility on the mom. And yes, it seems like, school finishes at 3, you still have some time with the kids. Doesn't work out like that. You sometimes have to put the kids to bed and do an overnighter, most nights, because you have the marking and all of that. But it's a nice illusion, that you have time with your kids. Actually, it's as demanding as any other profession. And sometimes, and when you're in a school, you know the teachers' kids, those are the ones completely neglected because you're looking after everybody else's children. So I would say it's a myth.
Well, I'm smiling because pregnant myself right now. If it's a girl, I know what to tell her. Do not choose a career based on motherhood. The next question will be for Mrs. Proserpina. Since you spoke about the fear of women to apply, I want to ask you that question. A speaker mentioned the fear of women to apply to certain jobs in schools. Concretely, what should schools implement to create a more inclusive space for women?
They need to be intentional. And I think many schools aren't intentional. And again, as I said earlier, I speak mainly based on my personal experience in international education. And it's very easy to talk the talk. Right now, the buzzwords in our international school spaces, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And sadly, that's what it remains as. So there are great statements on many websites. It looks totally phenomenal. But unless the leadership is leading these initiatives, at least unless they're there talking about them, talking at them, and coming up with policies that ensure that everyone is included, nothing happens. And I think it's the same thing with recruiting women. You know, Enko is actually spearheading this very important initiative. Let's get women in education. Let's get African teachers teaching in international schools, which is really exciting because we need more. So it's having the intention. They need to have the intention and transparency and honesty so that there isn't the fear. And many a time you hear, I mean, I've experienced this firsthand where I had to stop an interview and I said, is this all about affirmative action? Because stop already, I'm not interested, right? So I've applied, they're gonna tick a box to say, we interviewed an African woman for this role, but they're not good enough or they didn't make the grade. We hear also very often that they're not applying, which we all know is nonsense. It's not true at all. So it's decisions have to be made at the top by people who understand what their policies and visions and missions are of the schools so that others are encouraged to apply, be risk takers, go get it, and keep trying. You can't stop every time you're rejected. You have to keep applying and keep trying until you get there.
Thank you so much. Well, yay, we have a live question. So Mrs. Chelsea, can you please introduce yourself and tell us where you're calling us from?
Hello, I'm Chelsea from the DP2 Enko Riverside International School in Mozambique. My question is, how has your organization been able to assist and ensure equal pay and opportunities around Africa for women?
Do you have a specific speaker that you want to direct that question to, or to all of them?
To all of them.
Okay. Well, we'll go first from Mrs. Proserpina.
Well, at the moment, I'm working for the International Baccalaureate in The Hague, but I'm based in the UK. So I don't think I'm the correct person to answer that. All I can say is, since we, as an organization, since we hired a DEI director, there are many conversations about gender gap pay, which is really exciting. So the board is looking at that, the leadership is looking, and they have found lots of disparities on people, educators, staff, working, doing exactly the same job, but because of the gender being paid differently. So it's a work in progress where I'm working right now.
Okay, Ms. Radha.
Well, all I can say is that we are very lucky. Our HR director, carefully chosen by the CEO, is a woman, a feisty one. And we are rest assured that if there's ever a challenge in terms of pay, she will fight the good fight. And I just hope other organizations can do that as well. Put the right people in HR that make the difference. Yeah. Thank you.
Mrs. Utso, thank you so much.
Thank you. I guess I want to, I'd like to say that I think what's important as well is that we are not commensurating women and men because we want to fix that we are looking at remuneration from the context of levels of experience and skill and stuff. So for me, I am very happy to pay a woman, you know, based on her years of experience as a teacher and her educational background, as much as she's required, and even more of a man who might have been there for years but isn't delivering. And so it's really about how do we move, you know, I know that we're talking about the inequalities, but how do we also address and bring in some of the best practices, which is really important, you know, levels of and years of experience, the skills that many women bring, you know, how do we qualify those so people are paid what they are supposed to be paid and not paid based on whether they're a woman or a man. And that's kind of where we are as an institution. Our focus is on your level and skill of experience and qualifications.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Chelsea, for asking a question live. I will go to the next question, and that one I will have Mrs. Rather answer to that. I have realized as a female teacher that we lack confidence in the field of education. How best can you advise those who are in this position to boost their confidence? At times, we are even scared to ask questions in such platforms.
I've been there as a young teacher. It is a scary place. It's not easy, but I don't think people should stop trying. We should always. I don't think you'll rest easy if you need to say something and you don't say it. And sometimes it can be very difficult. But if you start in small ways, the first school I went to, the deputy said quite loudly in the middle of the staff room, "The birds over there are chatting," and he was talking about us. And there were some older teachers there, and they all just giggled, and I just couldn't let it go. So actually, I went to his office and I told him, I said, "I'm really scared right now, and it is my first day, but I really don't like what you said." And he was taken aback and he was angry, but later on he apologized, not publicly, but he never said that again in the staff room. So maybe there's little ways in which you can make your point. It doesn't have to be from a grandstand until you get the position to do it, and you will one day. But you know, just in little ways, if you can, try and make a difference, because young girls are also looking at you to be the role models, as scary as it is. I think men are also scared, but they just don't say it. We're strong because we can say it. But out of that fear can come something great. So always try.
Well, thank you. I have another live question. I don't know if my person is here already. Yes. Yay. So we have Rosa that wants to ask the question. So go ahead, introduce yourself and tell us where you're calling from.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Rosa.
All right. Yeah, I'm Rosa Maria from Mozambique, Maputo, Enko Riverside. I really like, I'm a teacher. I'm also a DP coordinator at Enko Riverside in Maputo. I really like this platform and this webinar, as it also ushers me into seeing what I can do and not being limited as a woman. Now, I have this question. The first one has been answered already by Miss Prosperina. Yeah, I think I am pronouncing the name well. No, sorry. Sorry.
No, it's Mrs. Proserpina.
Okay, I pronounced the R since it's Portuguese. Here we speak Portuguese. All right. All right. Amongst all the ideas that you have given us and all the motivational words and advices that you have given us, we still face as women, for example, let me take myself an example as a DP coordinator, and I'm a female. Sometimes we face, generally, we might face stigmatization or not being respected by the opposite sex. How do you go about that? Thank you.
Okay, so
Make it. Sorry, Ariane.
no, I wanted to say, Mrs. Proserpina, would you like to answer that question?
You know, Rosemary, when I'm the fourth child of 7 children. I was the middle child. I was the nerd. I used to read under the dining room table when my younger siblings were playing or the older ones were elsewhere. So I grew up as the shy, quiet child. My parents really had a hard time recognizing me as an adult because I totally changed and turned. So the confidence building will come from our socialization, but we also will choose people who will add value to us and lift us up as friends. And I think this is very important because, yes, we're shy, we're scared, but Rado mentioned something which is important in that when you believe, you can't sleep, you've got that bug which is bothering you because of something that's happened, then you have to address it. And that comes with the disrespect we encounter in our positions and what we do. It doesn't have to be a grandstand, but you address those individuals, you ask them aside, because it's all about respect and humility. And I said earlier on that we have to be excellent at our work. And each time you are excellent and you're doing a great job, then you have nothing to worry about from the naysayers. So you keep working hard. If someone disrespects you, you address it. And if you're not comfortable, you go to someone who's senior to help you address it, because you've been appointed in a role that the leadership believes you're capable of doing. And it's all about collaboration. It's all about being part of a team. And if there's a team member who's not being part of the team, that issue needs to be addressed. But you have to believe in yourself first before others can believe in you too.
Thank you so much. And Rosa, I think that's the answer, right? And thank you so much for raising your hand and and asking a question live. I see that I have another person that would like to ask a question live. So please go ahead, introduce yourself, and tell us where you're calling from.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your wisdom. This is Tobek Amnisi, and I'm from South Africa. I wanted to ask you all spoke at various points about the necessity of speaking truth to power, but Rada just shared an example now that even like that was an example of using your position and your truth to move the needle even a little, with the talking to your supervisor about not liking how you were spoken to during a meeting. But when new staff are asked, new teachers, to constantly do that to people who are in incredibly powerful positions, who also ensure their survival in that organization, but also actually give you your livelihood, it is exhausting. And I think that is why so many teachers who come in with passion end up leaving very soon after starting teaching. So how do we capacitate current leadership to be able to receive new ideas and new blood, so that it's not just up to the young people to be changing things and working in systems that are bent on just committed to exhausting them?
Mrs. Utso, I'm directing that question to you.
Hi, Rebecca. I think there's a responsibility on everyone to speak power, to speak truth to power. And I hear you about the issue of the imbalance of power. But if there are systems in place, it's important to have, for us to find the courage to push. And maybe it doesn't happen once, maybe it happens the second time or the third time. And it's about, okay, well, I've moved to that step and it's not working. What else can I do? And do I escalate it? I'm sorry, the lights have gone out. Yeah, I think there is a space where we need to be, to push, and to push further than just what we what we see and what's happening. Sorry, the gen set's on.
No,
Thank you so much. Well, I think that's our cue because we are past time now. Thank you so much, Tabika, for asking your question live. And so, ladies, I do not want this to end. I don't want to leave you guys, but every good thing has an end. And I would like to ask you, and I will go with Miss Radha, Miss Proserpina, and Mrs. Uso. What advice would you give to the women educators listening to us today?
it's time to change the narrative. So stand up, lean in, take your place. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Proserpina.
It's don't give up. I think fear cripples us many a time, and it's ever so important to also be in the right place. If you really feel that you're not able to solve this problem, then you have to ask yourself, is this the place I want to be? Because over and over again, it will eat you up and you will be sick eventually. If your leadership is not supportive and understanding and wanting the best of you, then maybe, and I speak from experience again, maybe that's not the place you need to be, because life is too short. You have to enjoy what you do, and you have to be given the opportunities. And when you try in a respectful way and it's not granted back to you, then maybe you have to be thinking, how do I then get to that organization which has a fit with who I am at the core and what I'm aspiring to do? So don't give up. Don't give up. Keep trying and keep doing your best, because you will get there. Trust me on that one.
Thank you. And Mrs. Utso for the last word.
I draw from what Radha and Pros have said, and say, be the change you want to see, be the peace you want to see. And really, life is too short. If you aren't in a space that's going to see and recognize you for who you are, yeah, vote with your feet. It's not worth the hassle, but in that you will learn. And as you learn the lessons, you'll be able to pay it forward in a different way. And I really, really mean that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And what I will keep in my mind is, ladies, we are calling on all women educators. So apply, stand up, don't give up, and be the change that you want to be. And let's make teacher the place to be and the job to do. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for all the people that participated to the webinar today. Thank you. And if you were not here today, we wouldn't be able to do this. And thank you to you, ladies. I was encouraged myself, and thank you so much for being here today. And I was honored to be here with you guys today. Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone. And I hope I'll see you sometime another time.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Ariane.
Such a wonderful toast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Radha. Thanks, Pros.
Bye.
Yeah, so nice to be with you.
Nice to
Bye.
see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Get
Thank
together.
you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao,
Bye,
ciao.
everyone. Thank you.